And look, at the end of the day, with any fiction, readers will understand that there is some creative license. And I think probably the three of us are going to have a more of a critical eye. And this is probably going to segue into what we're going to talk about now in terms of the bloopers and things that we see authors get wrong. And I see them all the time. And sometimes I guess readers will just forgive those, because
or not know about them.
Or not know about them and not pick up it. Whereas people coming from certain disciplines who will have more of a critical eye. And I guess the three of us are probably more guilty of having that critical eye. What I was going to do with you, Graham, is maybe almost like have a game of ping pong where I've got some ideas of some of the real common peeves that I see. And these are probably crime authors who probably should know better. These are big name crime authors, and they're getting fundamental stuff wrong. And I want to, I'm reading the book, and that can't happen. That can't happen. So I'll give you first go.
You're not name them, are you? You're not brave enough to name the authors, are you?
No, I won't do that. But how about you give us an example, and I'll bounce one back. So what's at the top of your hit list of bloopers?
Okay, basically having their officers at too high a rank. So detective inspectors, detective chief inspectors never go into interview rooms. It just doesn't happen in the UK. It's constables, detective constables, and detective sergeants are the people that make the arrests, do the searches, do the interviews, do the exciting stuff. But a lot of crime writers think, I need to make them important, so I'm going to make them a superintendent. And then basically you've sat them in an office for 3 months.
And my example is probably almost the other extreme. So I get what you're saying, where they've got their detective superintendent out kicking doors in, whereas in the real world, the superintendent will be sitting in an office somewhere, and they're more of a bureaucrat. I also you'll see a detective constable who is a lead for a homicide investigation, and one thing is here certainly in Queensland, in Australia, there are very few detective constables, because when you first get sworn in, you'll do probably at least 5 years on the road as a general duties uniform officer. Then you'll move into plain clothes, you'll get promoted to senior constable, and then you do your detective training. So usually the most junior detective is at least a detective senior constable. There's really no animal called a detective constable, because it takes you a number of 3 years to become qualified as a detective. So just kind of not understanding ranks as well, whether your officer is too junior or too senior. And so I'll bounce one back. One.
Don't I get? I have to do.
Sorry,
emergency services. It can't just all be bloody cop stuff.
No, you jump
in. There was one. I was literally, I've mentioned this repeatedly in the past with respect to one of my biggest peeves is shocking a flat line on the ECG. And you see it all the time. And you just, it's called a defibrillator because you defibrillate, and a fibrillation is just this jagged line. And so shocking a flat line is pointless. All you're doing is cooking the heart. You're doing nothing else. And would you believe the number one movie on Netflix at the moment is Atlas, right? And it's great. I really enjoyed it. Check your brain out the door sort of stuff. It's science fictiony stuff. But the crazy thing is that she is attacked. She gets, she's got this high-tech AI robot. Hopefully I'm not going to sort of cause too many spoiler alerts, but she goes into shock, or she goes into cardiac arrest, and repeatedly, on the monitor is this flat line, and she's repeatedly shocked by this machine, and lo and behold, gets a pulse back. And you just go, surely, with all of the money that is spent on these movies, somebody would go and point out that's just bollocks. But sorry, there you go. There's one for me.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Another one that annoys me. I've got a list here. We'll get through them quickly.
Oh, right. You got a list.
There'll often be a murder in a small town, and then the uniform constable or the uniform sergeant investigate a murder on their own. They don't get any. The detectives don't come in. The homicide squad don't come in. So you usually have these two bumbling uniform officers in a country town, and a murder happens, and they just investigate. And you think, no, that couldn't happen in any police station. There's no such thing as being an outpost station where you're not connected to your district headquarters, where you could get those supports who would come in, and the detectives would come in and provide that support. So that's another big thing that I often see authors get wrong. Back to you, Graham. What's your next on your list?
Well, again, similar theme. It's murder detectives that have only got one case running at a time. So you're kind of their sole investigation is the one that's on the page, and they've frankly got nothing else to do. And whereas in fact they're probably involved in about a dozen cases at various stages, from the one that came in last night to the one that's gone to the Court of Appeal, and they're kind of constantly dashing around. Now, obviously, on the page, you don't want to confuse the reader with lots of different murder investigations, popping up here and there, but just at least give them the sense of busyness, because because otherwise, when they solve with that murder, what are they doing? Sitting around playing cards? Some would say yes.
You mean they don't? I thought they were just eating donuts.
I got completely off piece here, but when I was doing safeguarding, I used to chair a safeguarding board, and the person that ran the community and engagement aspect of that board was an assistant chief fire officer. He's a lovely bloke, despite the fact he's a Tottenham supporter. He's a lovely bloke, and he came to one meeting, and they're quite some quite sort of senior people at the meeting, and he was going, yeah, sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a volleyball tournament for schools. We're going to do this volleyball tournament. We're going to have kind of some safeguarding resources there. We're going to have some safety. And I just said, and my mouth went before my brain did. I went, why is it always bloody volleyball with firefighters? We used to have this thing about firefighters used to spend all their time playing volleyball and sleeping or playing volleyball. I said, why is it? And then like senior counsellors were looking at it. I think.
Well, I have to say, when I was seeing the crimes in Norwich, the fire department, the fireys were next door, and the whole time they would play volleyball. So you see them playing volleyball, and you're just like, what?
I rest my case.
So, Harry, what's your next peeve?
Oh God, let's see. I didn't know that this was going to be you've obviously prepared a list, and me being my usual self, had done no preparation whatsoever. I think the one that I read recently was biggest huge one that really annoys the hell out of me: crime scene, dead body, ambulance. You go, what the hell's the ambulance doing there? They're dead. Yeah. There's nothing that we're going to do with a dead body. And lo and behold, the dead body gets put in the ambulance and driven off to where? The morgue?
Yeah.
Because you've got undertakers that do that. It's like, it's not rocket science. Nowhere do you get, or as far as I'm aware, there may be some sort of like remote area that an ambulance is used to remove a dead body from a crime scene, but generally it doesn't happen. You don't have
it's hard to get. It's hard to get parents to come to someone that's alive, let alone
exactly. We've got too much to do. I mean, I remember reading this one recently where there's this ambulance just sitting there while they're processing the crime scene with the soccos, and they're waiting to take the dead body away. And you're like, well, how on earth is that ambulance crew just sitting there doing nothing for hours and hours on end? Anyway. Next.
My next one's a real quick one. I got this one's a nice easy one. It's probably more for on screen, but firearms. So I was a firearms instructor as well. Here in Australia, certainly Queensland, we use Glocks, a Glock semi-automatic pistol to Glock 23. And how often, particularly in American TV shows, you see this alluded to in books as well, where for theatrical effect, they're about to go into a hot scene and they pull their Glock and they rack the slide, as if it's that theatric sound of the slide being racked. But what they don't realize is every time you do that, you're ejecting a round from your gun. So when you first carry your firearm, you load it, you put your magazine, you rack the slide, it engages a round in the cylinder. It's loaded, ready to fire. You do not need to rack so if you are racking the slide, it means your gun's not loaded. So you're walking around with the gun not ready to fire. So you see it all the time, and I've often seen that alluded to in books as well. Okay, now we're ready to go because we made that really cool sound with our gun. But it doesn't work that way. And sorry, just while I'm on guns, also revolvers. The way revolvers work are different to pistols, and they often talk about shells being ejected from a revolver. Or again, shells don't get ejected from a revolver. So there's a lot of stuff around guns that you see is referred to incorrectly as well. Graham, what's your next one?
Okay, my next one is another similar one around sort of technology type things. It's when people are being interviewed and they put the tapes in and the tapes were around. And I would say, when did you last see a cassette tape? When did you last see somebody with a C90 and a tube machine? It doesn't happen. You know, it's all digital now. It's all either on the cloud or to a DVD. And I don't know, people get really, really, oh, I want the drama of the tape going round. And going, why is that dramatic? Why is the tape going round dramatic? I mean, I remember them, and I remember the bloody thing stuck all the time. So, but yeah, so they inserted the tapes and the taped word, and then they locked eyes across the table. No, not unless you're writing in the.
And can I just jump in just while we're talking about interviews? I could bang on for ages about interviews, but commonly I see this in novels in particular, where there's the penultimate scene at the end where the protagonist has a conversation with the suspect and the suspect makes full admissions. And they have this conversation and then they get arrested based on those admissions. Now, they haven't been warned of their right to remain silent. The conversation hasn't been recorded. There's been no evidence gathering at all, but because it works in terms of the reader gets to finally hear the suspect's monologue where they're revealing what they've done. It's, maybe it's a whodunit and they finally reveal what they've done. Great. And then you often see, and I read a book recently, it was it was another high profile Australian author. I'm thinking, no, did you not get advice that this is not the way things work? Just because this officer had this conversation with the suspect and there was no independent witnesses, it was outside at a scene, at a lookout. It was a very poignant scene, the climax of the story, and the suspect made admissions. Okay, you are now under arrest, and you couldn't use that evidence because it wouldn't hold up in court. You haven't recorded it, and then you see the American TV shows and the interrogations. I do training with people. I do law enforcement training as a side gig, working for a training company. And I say to them, everything you see on American TV would not be admissible, the way in which they do things. So if you're being informed only by what you see on American TV, everything you write in your books will be wrong.
Or basic books in America.
Yeah, all basic books in America. And it's just pick one of the 18,000 law enforcement agencies.
Yeah.
So that's it. But I mean that's a really good point, because when I'm doing a manuscript review, I've got quite a keen eye for the point in which they need to be cautioned, they need to be read their rights, and because you can have a conversation with the suspect up until a point, but there comes a time where they become a formal suspect. That's when you need to put the caution in, and because people, as you say, Jack, people go hours beyond that, and none of that's admissible.
And people starting here in Australia making reference to the Miranda warning. I said,
oh yeah.
That's an American thing. The Miranda warning is American case law. Here in Australia, I know I actually have compared what we do in Australia, say, to the UK. We do, in essence, the same thing. The wording of our caution is a little bit different, where you explain, I wish to ask you further questions. Before I do so, I must warn you don't have to answer any question or make any statement, as anything you say will be recorded and later used as evidence.
It's almost as if you said that once or twice before.
Yeah, and that's so different to the American one. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, and we don't say that here in Australia. I think in the UK, the wording of your warning is a little bit different, where you make reference to anything you say, or if you don't say, now's your opportunity, and it may harm your defence if you don't say it now.
Yeah, now I've got to do it, haven't I? You don't have to say it may harm your defence if you don't mention any question, something you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. So yeah, it's that, because in the UK you can draw inferences if they suddenly come up in court and say, "Oh no, I remember I was on holiday in France that week."
Yes,
and I say, "So why did you call an ambulance?"
Oh, and there's so many.
Which one of you is the patient?
Another real big issue I have is referring to the feds, because again, when people watch American TV shows or read American books, because the American law enforcement system is so fragmented, they rely on the federal agencies to come in to assist. Whereas in Australia, the federal police only deal with national security issues, counterterrorism. They have their jurisdiction is in the Australian Capital Territory, which is a very small geographical location. Otherwise, they're more dealing
And
with
the airports.
Airports. So the feds don't come in to take over. So if the state police are investigating a homicide, I've read a lot of Australian books where they talk about the feds are coming in to assist or to take over, or police are coming in from another state to take over. No, none of that can happen. So just go and get some basic advice around the structure of policing and how the jurisdictions work. And again, some of this stuff is just so wrong. I think, you can forgive people for not knowing because they are only influenced by what they see on American TV. But if you're writing a crime story set in Australia, at least get the research, get the advice, get it right, because it'll be fundamentally wrong. And just that's my advice to writers, that they go and seek that advice.
Absolutely.
Because it is out there. It's people like, all of us, all three of us, we're there, and we understand what you're trying to do. We're not going to. I sometimes think people think if they come to us, basically we're just going to basically pull the rug on their story, and we're not. We're going to work with this. We're going to work with the characters, and we're going to make it more authentic. And you can easily, crime readers are so astute, and they know when people are guessing or having them over, and it's by speaking to somebody like us, you can avoid that, because you can, even if you're doing something that's completely unusual, like a senior officer being in an interview, you can just put in there something like the senior officer says, you'd obviously put it in dialogue, but I want to see the whites of his eyes when he tells us this, because there's nothing in law that says they can't be in the interview. It's just in practice they don't. So if you find a way to excuse that, then your reader's going, I can't understand it now, it's a bit unusual, but yeah, let's crack on with the story.
Yeah, it's about finding the happy balance between how can we make what you want to write, how can we kind of make it work so at least it's authentic or semi-believable, without at the end of the day you're the writer and you can still write what you want, but get that information, make an informed decision, and you can try and balance your story. Try and make it more procedurally correct. So as you say, Graham, that I think crime readers are very astute and they will be very critical if you get some of that fundamental stuff wrong. Well, gents, time has gotten away on us very quickly. We may have to wrap things up.
I can't believe how long we've been talking.
I know, and we could continue yakking on.
We could.
I'm sure, Harry, you got more bloopers you'd be dying to talk about.
Absolutely, but we'll hold off.
Graham, we've actually got some earlier episodes where myself and Harry and our former colleague Bryn, we actually spent episodes talking about a lot of this blooper stuff.
Ranting.
So, ranting. That's all it was.
Well, I'm sure. They are rants, and we do rant about it. But hopefully, writers find it useful, because they then it's the Rumsfeld thing, isn't it? They don't know what they don't know, and naturally,
yes.
and for the very reasons you say, so it is different in the US than in Australia or in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, I've authors, I really enjoy their books, and they're like, I can be thrown completely off track if I read it and go, oh my God, they've got this medical detail that is totally wrong. Like, you've got sort of your senior officers doing detective work or whatever. Similar sort of thing is like, you've got a doctor who suddenly becomes a pathologist, who suddenly becomes an ER doctor. And you go, no, there's specialists. that same person can't do all those different roles. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Actually, Harry, you'll appreciate this. Only recently, I had a reader for one of my crime books send me feedback saying, I loved your book. However, there was a suicide scene. And I've been to real suicide scenes where people have died from carbon monoxide poisoning, gas suicides.
Yeah.
And I described the dead body.
Cherry red lips.
Cherry red lips. I described the body having pale skin and blue lips. And this person came back to me saying, carbon monoxide poisoning, they have cherry red lips, and I got it wrong. Well, that was it. That was what this person said. So what's the answer to that?
Look, the actual total answer, I mean, I've seen it on several occasions, and generally you very rarely see the cherry red lips. The problem is that carbon monoxide, cutting it very short, basically the hemoglobin gets locked by the carbon monoxide, so it still looks red. The thing is that when you put somebody who's died from carbon monoxide poisoning and on a slab, and you put it next to somebody who hasn't died from that, they will look as if they've got slightly more redder lips because of the locked hemoglobin. compared to the dead body that died of other causes, they will have very pale or almost like blue lips. And that's where it comes from, is that comparison on where you've got two dead bodies. But if you just look at one, the lips are not going to look any different to it's not going to be this really, and what colors are cherry?
Well, there you go.
What you'd think it's like dark purple. I've seen most of the dark purple, and that's not the color that it goes at all. So yeah, it's a bit of a one of those, yes, it's supposed to happen, and in all the books it's quoted, but when you actually see people, no.
Well, I had another reader who, it's interesting what people pick up. I was talking about a jacaranda tree, and it was flowering, the beautiful purple flowers, and I had the wrong month. And they said, no, jacarandas don't flower in whatever month it was. And I got, and so people will pick up what they want to pick up. So
yeah.
Guys, look, I'm just very mindful of time, and I know we've taken up a lot of Graham's valuable time, so we should pull up stumps there. So Graham, thanks very much. So where can people go if they're, number one, my first question is, are you predominantly focusing on people in the UK, or do you do more broadly international writers as well? Because you've got a whole list of experts. So that was something I want to ask you about. Yeah. You've got a whole list of police and forensic, and whole big long list of high caliber experts,
and one low caliber one, which is
our one and only Harry Colfer is one of those experts as well. So do you refer people to those experts depending on what their questions are? How does that work?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I receive all the, my website is www.policeadvisor with an OR, because there is somebody out there that's got ER. I don't know why they did that, but policeadvisor.co.uk. And I've got a list of experts on there. I kind of predominantly, my expertise and knowledge experience is UK based. Where things fall outside of my own knowledge and expertise, I'll refer on to a colleague. And I know Jack and I, we've spoken about me kind of referring on to you for Australian inquiries that I might get. So yeah, I kind of act as a bit of a clearinghouse. I do a lot of it myself, but I act as a clearinghouse as well. I mean, one of the things in the UK is that England and Wales and Scotland, England and Wales as an entity and Scotland as a separate entity are very different. But it's a bit like England and Australia. Sometimes the differences are really subtle. So I personally, I won't touch anything north of the border, but I've got two people on my team that will. So I just refer everything to them, and they're really experienced around that. So, and that's really important, is that using people that aren't going to guess. If you're coming to an expert, then don't guess. But you can get hold of me and any of the experts through policeadvisor.co.uk, and we'd be happy to help and refer you on to the right expert according to your needs.
And we'll be happy to plug those web details as well as we promote this podcast. So final word to our viewers again: if you're writing crime fiction, as we said before, seek out people like the three of us and others who are out there available to give that advice. It will really certainly boost your writing in terms of your authenticity. So Graham, thank you so much for your time. You've been an absolute gentleman to give us your time. We'd certainly look forward to chatting again in the future if the opportunities arise. Thank you for your time. All the best with your writing endeavors, and we'll watch your writing career and your consultancy career bloom as it progresses.
And likewise to you. I look forward to reading your stuff or more of your stuff, because I've read one of Harry's anyway, but more of your stuff. And yeah, good luck with what you're doing. It's good stuff.
Many thanks. Great talking to you.